Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi folks and welcome aboard this week's podcast. I hope you're all having an epic week and ready to oil up or lube up those earlobes for this fresh and very juicy listen. On this week's podcast, I'm diving into addiction. And in part because it shows up so regularly with my clients, and I want to share some of what I've learned, some of what I see, but also because I've had direct experience with it myself in my own life. And I think us all as humans, to be honest, we pull in coping mechanisms constantly, forms of self-soothing, that we get impulses that drive us back towards them, and we're often left feeling out of control of our own behaviour. So I first want to start this off with when I was back really struggling with alcohol, and I've struggled with many things in my lifetime, and now I own them. I don't feel shame or guilt. They're how I coped, they're how I survived with what I had going on inside. And for me, a lot of the time, that is all addiction is. So I, as I've told you before, am the absolute queen of journaling. They were giving out crowns for it, and it has been in a lot of ways my salvation and the rebuilding of my relationship with myself. And I found this piece that I wrote a long time ago, and it's only very short, and I want to share it with you folks. So it reads, "To the addict in me fighting to be free, what is it that you want? Love, acceptance. You are the weaker, more fragile parts of me, my history, my wounds, my fear and my lack. When I am scared, negative or in need of comfort, you are always the voice that says, you need me, get me, taste me, let me in. I will take it all away." The addict part of me is an angry child, my comfort zone and my smallness. Smallness in fear of realising or releasing my own attention, fear of myself, fear of my own rage, of what'll show up if I don't have you to dampen all those feelings down. The addict above all else promises peace of mind, peace from the chaos that's going on within, and that is something that I am searching so hard for. Peace in my thoughts, peace in my being, peace in my life, and peace to feel safe in this world. And I share this with you folks because it's in living through addiction and feeling what it has felt like that has really shown me what it is and why it shows up in so many lives, and in a lot of ways, depending on the addiction, can literally cause carnage. Addiction is, for that person, it's like a shadow looming on your shoulder, always calling you back, always that voice that's going, come back to me, let me in, have me, eat me, drink me, smoke me, whatever it is that addiction is, inject me. It is there in the background like a shadow, waiting, looking for triggers to ignite you, looking for triggers to ignite you and drive you back, giving you all the time, that voice that's giving you all the reasons you need to literally return to the shadows with it, to hide in the shadows with it, to join it there in your own darkness, in shame and loneliness, unable to show yourself to the world, unable to let people see what's really going on because the shame is keeping you exactly where it wants you to be. And we can spend years pushing away our own shadows, literally hating our our own weaknesses, where we didn't show up for ourselves in trauma, believing there's ways we should have been behaved, when it can be a deep powerlessness from when we were children, the people we couldn't save, the traumas we couldn't protect ourselves from. It lies in lack of forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for things we did, the ways we behaved, whatever it is. That's where it comes up from. It comes from the parts of ourselves that hate ourselves, that are ashamed of ourselves for different things that we've experienced. It's buried in trauma, and the more we aren't feeling the creation of it, the more we are sitting and living in shame, the louder the shadow's call is. And it's opening up, and that's why I love shadow work, even within hypnotherapy. I absolutely love doing the shadow work, because it's only in opening up to the shadows of ourselves that we get to see what it is that we're so afraid of. Because when we experience trauma in our lives, it's not the experience itself, it's what that made us believe about ourselves. That's what we're carrying. That's what we're searching for. And that belief that it made you think of about yourself, that lack, is what you're trying to relieve yourself from when you're returning to an addiction constantly. You're relieving yourself or trying to escape those feelings. I think the saddest thing about addiction is, with people with an addiction, they're literally jeopardizing their lives to make the present moment just livable. And when I'm speaking of that, I'm speaking to like drug addictions, alcohol addictions, even gambling addictions, sex addictions. All of these things, they're literally jeopardizing their life, their families, their homes, all of these things, just to make the present moment livable. To the addict, the actual addiction is the anesthetic that makes that moment livable. And unfortunately then the anesthetic wears off, and there's the pain that they're trying to suppress, and the guilt and shame of how they're living, how they're being, how they let themselves down. All them dark shadows rise again, and therefore the return to the coping mechanism kicks back in to get away from all those feelings. And I genuinely believe, folks, in some ways and on some level, we are all addicted to different things. They may not be as destructive as, say, heroin, cocaine, or chronic alcohol use, but we all have our coping mechanisms, and we all believe that our coping mechanisms are easing, self-soothing. And it is only in looking at what we're soothing ourselves from, what is the pain we're trying to mask, what is going on underneath, because it is unresolved, unprocessed emotions, generally relating to trauma, to pain, to grief, things we just do not want to feel. And for the addict, a lot of the time they don't even know where to begin. They don't know what it is that they're feeling in the first place, what's going on, and they've turned their pain in on themselves, and they're unleashing it internally. They're turning it into, this is because you are, this is because you're a this, you're a this, you're a this, you're a this. And it's self-hatred, self-loathing, and the addiction just compounds that. But to the addict, they believe it's anaesthetizing them from it. And momentarily it is, which is why we return to it. There are so many forms of addiction I've met in doing what I do. And again, as I've mentioned, folks, addictions that I've lived through myself. I've had bulimia, I've been a 20-30 a day smoker, I've had alcohol addictions, and all of these were driven by the impulse to escape what I was feeling. And I've done a lot of work, and I'm still a work in progress on some of the things that showed me. And I genuinely believe we're all a work in progress, and until we do the work and dive into it, we're constantly going to be turning to different coping mechanisms. And some of what I see is we can become addicted to stress, addicted to chaos, addicted to busyness, because busyness stops us feeling. Busyness stops us feeling the feelings we don't want to feel, because we're too busy to feel them. We're always running around. So stress and busyness are one of the tools that we use to cope. And stress over time can cause so many other physical ailments like burnout, disease within the body, shutdown, so many different things. Stress is one that shows up hugely. Anxiety, as soon as the emotions start rising up, anxiety shows up and pushes them back down, driving the person back to all different sorts of coping mechanisms. And the biggest thing I've always believed with struggling with anxiety in my own past is anxiety causes you to avoid a massive amount of people, situations, places, because you don't feel safe in the world. And what that is a reflection of is just not feeling safe within yourself. And that shows up, and our body gets completely addicted to the patterns it has learned for us to keep us safe, to keep us what it deems safe. Emotional eating, that's one of the biggest ones that we'll see. And usually, sometimes emotional eating can swim alongside another couple of coping mechanisms, but a lot of the time we don't eat for health, for hunger. We eat for every other reason beyond that. You find yourself, buying the 5-pack of bars or whatever it is, the giant cake, and tell yourself you're only having a slice. An emotion hits, and there you are, hoovering the whole cake. And then afterwards, guilt and shame kicks in, and we turn to food again to soothe us from that guilt and shame. And they all end up in spirals of circles. Netflix numbing. Now, I'm always blaming it on Netflix, but when I say this, I'm talking about YouTube, Disney, all of TV overall. Just Netflix numbing rhymes a little nicer. That's why I choose it. But it's all of those apps that we choose to use to numb ourselves out. Screen scrolling, pain medications. I see so many on antidepressants, anti-anxieties, anti-psychotics, anti-this, anti-that, anti-the other, believing that these are serving a purpose. Now, I'm not saying they are all not serving a purpose by any means. I genuinely believe medications can hugely help with so many different things. But if you're on something 5 years, 10 years, and you yourself don't believe it's helping, well, then it is just becoming an addiction. Cocaine, heroin, sex, smoking, these are all addictions that I see show up within my practice. And as I've mentioned, some of which I have dealt with myself: the stress, the anxiety, eating disorders, alcohol. I had an absolute magical array of coping mechanisms in my time, and all of them were because of the same thing. And a lot of the time in our day-to-day, we can literally be triggered by different situations that drive us back to the addiction. And because we don't understand what we're being triggered because of, or why we're being triggered, because we've suppressed some things so deeply that we can't even see the roots of it anymore. We don't know where it began or what created it. And that fear again drives us back to the coping mechanisms. But addiction in of itself is just an inability to cope with what the system is feeling, with what's going on internally, and using something else constantly just to make the moments livable. And then the whole system either completely believes it requires it, or depending on what your addiction of choice is, the physical system does need it. It does require it to keep the organs functioning. And as I say, I see it even when in the homeless work I do, when you see people for all different sorts of addictions, it all comes back to the same thing: our inability to manage or cope with what's going on within our system. And it is in the learning of that, the lifting the lid and looking underneath and understanding the triggers and being okay with feeling our own emotions. It's only in that we understand why we're feeling them in the first place and what it is that we're being triggered because of. Because otherwise, every time we become stressed, we become anxious, we become triggered, we return to these same addictive behaviors, these same coping mechanisms, and the impulsive thinking that comes with them. In a moment, you're making that choice to drive to the shops and buy the alcohol, buy the munch, drive to the street corner and buy the cocaine or wherever it is. We're literally triggered to go do these things straight away, to anesthetize ourselves, to stop ourselves from feeling. And again, it all comes back to the same thing, not wanting ourselves to feel. I know certainly for me, there was absolutely a lot of unprocessed trauma, but also what I was really, really feeling was completely unsafe. Completely unsafe. I didn't trust myself at all. I didn't trust any decisions I made. I didn't trust myself with me. I felt unsafe in my own system, and I felt unsafe within the world. If I wasn't shown up as who everyone believed I was, as what the world thought I was, well then they'd see who I really was, and they'd reject me, abandon me, run away, point the finger, judge me, all of these things. All of those things were what were going on internally, and how that manifested was me trying to anesthetize myself in so many ways that didn't work. So many ways, from grief, from trauma, from feeling unsafe, from feeling ungrounded. And it's only in understanding this and beginning to learn the practices and do what I do that you will move to a path of change, move to a point of change. Unfortunately for us as humans, we tend to reach a chronic level of suffering before the place we're in becomes so uncomfortable, so painful, that our only choice is to change. And it does not have to be that way. Sadly, a lot of the time it is, but it doesn't have to. For me, that's where it got to. It got to where it was a choice between living and not. And again, that was in deep unprocessed trauma, unprocessed pain, and some of what that created was a set of beliefs about me, an identity structure I felt I had to stay inside, a self-image that I'd imposed, that I believed kept me safe. And if anybody chipped away at that, or seen what was underneath, or I stepped outside my own limits, then I went into full panic. I went into full, oh my God, they'll see who oh, they'll leave, oh, they'll this. And I was such a people pleaser. I'd show up as everything I thought everyone wanted me to be. And I burned myself out in so many spaces. But that was better than, to me, the alternative. And the only way that I could calm my system or settle was one where alcohol was literally numbing out, dialing down, slowing, anesthetizing my system. With bulimia, it was control. It was every time I stepped outside the paradigm, I ate too much that didn't fit into what I was allowed, the rules I'd created myself for how I should be. The bulimia then took hold. And there's so many other examples, but it all comes back to the same thing. Addiction, the only way to deal with addiction is by going internal, is by shining a light on that shadow voice that's in there speaking constantly. Listen to what it's saying, listen to what it's telling you, looking at how it's showing up in your lives, and beginning to believe that you are worth so much more than what that traumatized self, what your wounds are telling you. Because every time we turn to addiction, it's just our wounds speaking. It is just our shadows, our pain, our shame. It's just them speaking. And again, to the addict, there's a true belief that it just makes life, the world, livable. It just makes living as who they are livable. And it's working on the shame, the guilt, the trauma, all of these things that are stuck and trapped within, living in the shadows of our being. It's working on them. That is your freedom. It is your liberation. And that's out there waiting for everyone. Did I think at the times that I was, living the way I was and doing the things I was doing to myself, that I would be living this way now? Absolutely not. Did I think I'd have the level of happiness that I have in my life? No. When I say this, it's not all sunshine and lollipops. I don't live with unicorns now. Of course, I feel pain, I feel sadness, I feel grief. But the point there is I feel them. and I don't turn them internal. I don't rage upon myself. I recognise that other people's behaviours are just theirs. They own them. Other people's capacities are just theirs. I can't save anyone. I can't save anyone from death, from mental illness, I can't save anyone who does not want to change. That's not on me, that's on them. My point of power is within me. My choice is within me and how I choose to live. And in that, you're taking away addiction's power. You're taking away your own shadow power. You're not living from there anymore. You're not living from your wounds and your pain. You're living from your true self, who you are. And folks, I genuinely mean this when I say this. If this is something that you're struggling with, in any way, shape or form, any coping mechanism, addiction that's shown up in your life, please, if you want any more information, anything like that, don't hesitate to contact me, to reach out, because that is your point to taking back your power. It's the living in the powerlessness that this is the way it's always going to be, or you're too ashamed, you feel too guilty, you don't want to be seen a particular way. That's keeping you where you are. That's keeping you in that space. It's the reaching out. I always say it takes great strength to ask for help, to ask for support. It's our own weaknesses that stop us. It's our own lack that stop us. So please do reach out if you want any more support. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about, or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews, because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye bye.